We have the lighthouse up here, and it symbolizes our collective IQ. This is our current state of collective IQ that we're going to improve. And the idea that, you know, our collective IQ is what allows us to see through the fog. It allows us to see the horizon. It allows us to see what's out there. It's our collective foresight and insight, our collective perception, and our collective memory. And so that's the lighthouse there. And then the loop-de-loops is the research process and the built-in accelerators that he had designed specifically to speed up the innovation process. Now, the first accelerator was discussed a little bit in the panel discussion, the coevolution, which came from the idea when he looked at, well, we're raising collective IQ, and that's a capability. And a capability, the way we work together now comes from centuries of very slow evolution of not only the tools like the stone tablet and paper and that type of thing, but the whole human side of the equation of how the language and customs and you know, how people organize themselves and the roles people have. And this all was very slowly evolved over centuries based on whatever tools were available at the time. Realize, you know, it's not just a demo. This is how they work. This is how they live together here at the office. This is how they think and how they interact and how they do all of the stuff that they do. This is how they develop the system. They use the system to develop the system. And that takes us to our next accelerator, which is the bootstrapping, is that you're using what you're building, because the target end user organizations are all, you know, whoever it is that's working on to solve important problems. And this team was working on a very complex, urgent problem of learning how to harness collective intellect better. And so, you know, everything they built should work for them too. And they're an excellent test case. And in fact, they're probably the best test case because they're the most demanding users. And then as soon as they had stuff working well enough, then they could start having that documentation online. And so every time they got something working, they would use it. And they were adapting also their work processes at the same time. So they were doing the coevolution and the bootstrapping, and that's just one example of that. So then the next accelerator was about networking. So the question, you know, Dad was thinking, well, okay, well, we're getting this working in the lab, and then our next phase is, you know, how are we gonna move this out so that the capability becomes a bit more broadly available? So Dad found a handful of people from different organizations that were already tied to the ARPANET, and found the people in that organization who were responsible for, you know, being the change agent, who would be the ones who would bring this capability into the front line of the organization, and had them come and learn how to use the system and learn how to work that way so that they would know then what it is they were trying to transfer into their organizations. Now so then what you have is networking vertically, because from the lab to these change agents, and incidentally, Dad gave them the name Knowledge Workshop Architect, because that was, each one of these people were going to be the people in their organizations who were going to be the architects of the knowledge environment for that organization. Okay, so then underlying all of this is that, because they went from paper on the walls to bringing the information into the computer and finding all kinds of flexible ways to, you know, create documents and fly through them and land exactly where you want and get different views and all of that kind of stuff. So they had this really wonderful repository, very rich repository starting to emerge. And very quickly then it can pile up. And so, you know, the challenge is, how do you keep making this whole environment more flexible, more agile, so that you really can have tons of information and really scale up and still be able to get your hands on what you need at any point in time, the exact piece of information that you need at any point in time. So it was this vision then, I contend, the vision and the innovative accelerators that are definitely his greatest breakthrough innovation of all. And then here's the challenge. If we could take that vision and that same accelerative strategic approach that got such incredible results, even at that level of what was possible for technology at the time, and embed that into today's teams and organizations, leveraging next generation interactive computing, then just imagine the incredible levels of innovation that could be unleashed. And that actually is the grander revolution that Dad envisioned from the very beginning.
Doug has had a very difficult time getting people to sponsor what he looks at as the real center foci of the research. And that's largely because everybody wants to work on their problem. So they don't want to build tools to bootstrap. They want to build tools to do a database search. They want their problem solved. And so he's just had a really hard time. Nobody has actually come out and funded things directly over all these years. That's part of it. I think the other part of it is that the world went down this path with the general purpose tools of wanting things easy, right? And I mean, I think it was Itzhak Perlman do a thing about this recently, actually, about how difficult it is to learn the violin, but what a tremendous payoff you get if you learn to use the violin. And Alan Kay used to use that example. You can sit down with an organ and you can get up to a competent level almost instantly. But if you want to do really outstanding things, you need really high-tuned tools. And people understand this. If you go and look at the user interfaces and things like AutoCAD and some of the mechanical engineering tools, it takes a really long time and a lot of skill to get up to being really, really good. Even Photoshop is that way. It's hard to, it's pretty tricky to get Photoshop down. But for some reason, people have never wanted in just the basic things. So that's been a huge problem. And also, Doug is really an advocate of sort of this dynamic structure of things, of having documents with a very dynamic structure to them. And that's never worked well. I mean, people just, they want their left to right, top to bottom, fixed format stuff, and it's just been extremely difficult for it to catch on.